Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Idea to Impact. And today we are with Dr. Kailash Nadh, who is the CTO of Zerodha. And as we all know, Zerodha is one of the biggest stock broker firms in India. And Dr. Kailash Nadh has completed his BSc in Computer Science in the year 2008 and has obtained his PhD in Artificial Intelligence and Computational Linguistics in the year 2011. He is the founding director of FOSS United and Rain Matter Foundation. He is also a part of the Indic Digital Archive Foundation, which is a non-profit organization that works on digital archival and preservation of Indic languages. Sir, since you did your PhD in I wanted to ask you now, with the current exponential growth that we are seeing in AI, do you think AGI is a possibility? If it is, how far do you think are we away from it? Is it just a matter of time?
Well, firstly, thank you for the gracious introduction. And that's a big, loaded question. And I don't, unfortunately, have a clear answer. Nobody really knows. But what I can say is when I was involved in AI research, it was a small subset of AI,
Mm,
neurocomputation. It was, I think, 12, 13 years ago. What was state of the art a decade ago and what is state of the art today are entirely different, incomparable beasts. The breakthroughs, engineering breakthroughs, not necessarily perhaps scientific, but engineering breakthroughs we've seen in machine learning and AI in the last 3 to 5 years is quite astonishing. Now, there are entire schools of people who believe that the current iteration of generative textual AIs, language models like GPT-4, there's a whole school of thought where people believe that these things are already kind of AGI. So I think, and of course, there are a large number of people who say that no, it's not.
mm,
So it's complicated. I think even the definition of what AGI is has been shifting. With the breakthroughs with these large language models, the kind of behaviors they exhibit, I think the goalpost for AGI in the mainstream has changed a bit. But of course, in the traditional sense, AGI, even in the traditional sense, AGI is meant to be something that is on par or better than human intelligence. But it has not been defined well. So what I'm personally thinking is these models, these breakthroughs will keep getting better to the point where they are widely useful for a large number of things. And that question of whether is it AGI or not, that question itself may change. I think we'll have to rethink of what AGI means. And yeah, there's no clear answer, honestly.
all right. Sir, and once you did your PhD abroad, and since many of the students in general are aspiring for a career abroad, I wanted to know what made you come back to India.
I never aspired for a career abroad. So I ended up in the UK. I spent 6 years there studying. I ended up there by a sheer series of coincidences. So I went there to study. So when I finished my studies, I immediately came back, literally a week later. So for whatever reasons, it was always clear in my head that I was there to study, and once I finished my studies, I wanted to come back to India. Now, I also never really wanted a career per se. I didn't want to look for a job, find a job, or really work in a corporate environment. Once I'd finished my PhD, there were a large number of career avenues that had opened up in academia, in industry. But I decided to say no to everything and just to come back to India to work on hobby projects, stuff that I've always done, to work on hobby projects, to work on whatever I felt like working on, and also making a modest living because I knew how to freelance, write software for others, and make a decent living online. So I guess in that sense, my aspirations were a bit unconventional. I finished my studies, I came back, and I didn't want to get a job or work in a corporate environment.
Right. Sir, so as you said, you have been writing code for quite some time now. And in
Mhm.
fact, in your Reddit AMA, for one of the questions, you said that patience is the virtue that is one of the most important virtues a software engineer requires. What are some insights or learnings or thoughts you can say to someone who's in college trying to figure out coding step by step and is just starting their journey?
I think that hasn't changed one bit. Good engineers, good software developers, good software engineers are made uh, from hands-on practice. There are no shortcuts. You can read books, you can watch YouTube videos, you can look at tutorials, but unless you sit down, build stuff with your bare hands, build and break, and start understanding the abstract nuances of what software is, how software works. So you absolutely need practice. And at some point, you realize that the languages, frameworks, etc., they are all cyclical. Today, there's a framework that's
Yeah,
hot.
yeah.
5 years from now, it's,
Yeah, I just wanted you to add on to this question was I read your blog on FOMO and like
hmm,
it hit home because I see a lot of students over here jumping from framework to framework or library to library. So I would want your answer to progress into that if that's fine.
yep. So it's a bit hard to describe. Of course, there are fundamental concepts of computer science, and there have been tons of books that have been written about them. But unless you really write software, many different kinds of software for many different scenarios, for yourself, for others, for businesses, for end users, for fun. So unless you write a lot of software, uh, build it, break it, give it out. Even giving out software is really important. You have to build something and you have to give it out to other humans to use. That's how you learn how the abstract interface between software and humans, how it really works. So unless you do all of this, unless you gain this experience by hand, it is not. I can say with certainty that it's not really possible to become a good engineer. So you need time and you need patience, because writing software is not so easy to be. Writing complex software is. I'll give you one example. Just the other day,
Mm,
I was trying to deploy something, uh, an old program. I think a bunch of old shared C libraries. So I figured it's a pain to deploy on a Linux DigitalOcean instance. I'll
mm,
write a Docker file for these bunch of things, and
mm,
I'll make it a Docker deployment so that
mm,
it becomes portable and I can use it in the future. And I've written many Docker files. But that
mm,
day ended up this was last week, and I spent like 7 hours fiddling with it, trying to get it to work, trial and error. There's always those tiny little nuances, that one tiny thing that will stump you, and you have to work really hard. So ultimately, that's what it really comes down to. When building a complex system, you might get to 80% or 90% really quickly. The last
mm.
10% will take probably 10x more time. So to overcome, to understand, to take those nuanced decisions, to decide on those trade-offs, saying, you know what, I will do this or I won't do this, or I'll take this approach. You don't get that from books. You really need to have built up experience building and breaking all different kinds of software through trial and error. So I'll repeat what I said again. You have to be extremely patient, and you have to literally write code and understand all kinds of nuances, from technical to the abstract to the interface between the human and the software. So yeah, practice, write stuff.
Sir, so for all the students that are listening, can you just shed some light on what is open source, why does it matter, and what kind of freedom comes with open source code and collaboration in general?
Right. So I am using Firefox, the browser, right now on my Fedora Linux laptop, and Chrome is perhaps the most popular browser in the world. And these are both open source software, free and open source software, FOSS. And if you look at, let's say, pick Zerodha. Zerodha is a large financial institution. We have apps, we have services, technology, etc. Right? But internally, we've picked up uh, free and open source software from really across the world. Stuff that hobbyists have built, organizations have built, stitched them together to build what is Zerodha. So your Python programming language, your Go programming language, your JavaScript frameworks, these are all open source systems. You don't pay a royalty or a license to write code in Python now or JavaScript, right? Imagine having to pay someone to even write code to tinker. That is unimaginable. It's now given to us that these languages that we code in, they all come for free. So that these are all great examples of free and open source software. So and really fundamentally it implies that the software or code that you give out, it comes with four fundamental freedoms: the freedom and liberty to use, to modify, to study, to redistribute, to do whatever you'd like to do with it without any encumbrances or without any burden. So when I started out learning to code, I think this was the year 2001 or 2000. I was copy pasting code I found on the internet, over dial up internet, and copy pasting it to my local system, changing a few things, running it, seeing what happens. And that's how I learned to code. There weren't great user manuals. There was no, Google wasn't popular. There weren't,
Documentation.
yeah, no documentation, no blogs, no GitHub, no resources, right? So it was all trial and error, and no peer groups either where I was. So that's how I learned. And I figured, so when I started writing people on the internet, because I learned by copy pasting stuff from the internet. So it came to me naturally. It felt entirely natural to me that whatever I write, I'll paste it on the internet for others to use. So I did this. This is how I learned to code. This is how I wrote all my programs. And after a couple of years, I realized that this whole thing was called open source, free and open source software. Uh, and if it wasn't for FOSS, free and open source software, I wouldn't have been able to learn programming. Uh, so that's the philosophy of free and open source software. You write software and you give it to others, and others are free to do whatever they want with it. Now, there's this big confusion in the open source world. Free, the word free, right? Does it mean that you write software and you give it out to people completely free of cost, expecting no compensation in return? That's not true. Free, there's a classic adage: free as in freedom. So it's not that you give it out for free. Free here stands for freedom. That said, most free and open software in the world today comes for free, also free of cost. You download Python, Firefox, Chrome, whatever you want, right? We don't really pay for
Yeah.
software, and this is all open source software. So, yeah, I mean, really stands for freedom, but open source also has kind of become this thing where you get high quality software for free for the, yeah, and it has some downsides, but there's a whole discussion downsides, as in the people who make free and open source software, people who spend time, they also need to get compensated. There's a big discussion, but that's really like a gist of what free and open source software is. And absolutely everything in the world today runs on open source software. Your Android phones it runs Android and the Linux kernel. Absolutely everything. Every single app that we use, every single unicorn startup we've heard of, everybody uses open source software, be it JavaScript, be it a database, be it any, pretty much all pieces of the technology stack are open source software. Yeah.
So, sir, now that you've highlighted on what is open source and the significance of it, could you just shed some light on how has the open source culture grown in India over time, and how has FOSS paid way for it, and how can students like join FOSS as a movement or the club?
So it's a little peculiar what's happened in India. In the 2000s, I think there were strong open source, free and open source, free software communities uh, spread across India. It also, I think, coincided with the Wikipedia movement. And these are all run by enthusiasts. The software wasn't big in the early 2000s. Internet businesses, etc., were a novelty, right? So it was kind of like a hacker's paradise. Everybody who was in a FOSS community, they were hackers and tinkerers. They were there because they were the early adopters. But then the whole, startup explosion of the startup ecosystem happened in the last decade or so. And India started seeing technology companies come up, all the cool apps that we use today, everything. And I think with that, the FOSS movement in India kind of took a backseat.
Yes.
It became a techno business exposition, really. Wherever you look, there are tech conferences, the corporate tech conferences, startups that talk about technology, etc. But I think that entire thing, the growth of the tech industry entirely consumed the FOSS movement. And this was one of the reasons why we started FOSS United as a non-profit foundation, because bunch of us, we were annoyed by the fact that the same industry, for instance, that uses open source software, forced to build stuff, doesn't talk about it, doesn't acknowledge, let alone, give back. So that's how FOSS United happened. We wanted those conversations to come back. We wanted the industry to support FOSS projects, FOSS projects and communities, back projects that from which they derive value. And what we've seen over the last 4 years, I think FOSS United is just about 3.5 or 4 years old now, is that there's this huge vacuum. There was this huge vacuum for FOSS community, for FOSS activities. The events that we run, entirely run by volunteers, distributed. FOSS clubs have formed with the help of FOSS United in a bunch of cities. These are all students coming together, for instance, and organizing it themselves. So there's a big vacuum. And we are excited by that because there's a big demand and there's
Yes.
great interest. People are
Yes.
interested. Never there wasn't an avenue community, but the moment there was an avenue, people are super interested. So how can you contribute? I think it's not really about FOSS United, the organization. It's one organization. You
Yes.
participate by tinkering, by hacking, by learning and building little things or bigger things tomorrow that others find useful. So that is the beauty of the FOSS movement. Really, that's the core tenet of FOSS. You build something, you give it out, and others find utility in it. And I personally still enjoy doing it. I work on my FOSS projects pretty much every week, and I don't really. There's no financial gain. It's just that spirit of tinkering, building something new, giving it out, others using it. That's an amazing feeling. So you should do it for that. And and it's a win-win. You do that, and your skills improve, and that might just set up your career as well.
So now that students are motivated by knowing what FOSS is and wanting to contribute, now probably the initial challenge that they might face is once they go to the GitHub repositories and start looking at the code and wanting to contribute, it might be very huge, or it might feel overwhelming for them to look at all that code at once. What are your uh, advice that you can give to them? And in general, when you're writing code as well, it's very anxiety driven or overwhelming. How would they deal or tackle those situations?
I think going to GitHub and looking for projects to contribute is not the right approach, and it rarely works. So you can't just go pick up any repository, understand the code there, understand everything about the piece of software, and internalize it enough to quickly contribute. That's not how it works. You the best way to start out by contribute sorry the best way to start out is to look for problems, not projects. You don't look for software or tools or repository or projects. You look for problems around you. There could be that one problem that is bugging you constantly, and you want it solved for yourself with code. Imagine it's a problem that you can solve with code. It could be, just trying to come up with an example. Yeah, imagine you find it painful to convert between dates or
Yeah.
look up the weather, and
Yeah.
you don't like what is out there, but it constantly bugs you. So you make a little tool that solves that tiny little problem in a nice way that you like, and that becomes the beginning of a project. Then you share that with the world, and most of these problems that we face, there are others in the world also who face the same problem.
Yes. Yeah.
So then they discover your project and they use it. Then the probability of them contributing your project and your project growing goes up. It's not a guarantee. There are
Yeah.
millions and millions of dead open source projects out there. But looking for a problem that you understand, that annoys you, that you can relate to, and then writing a solution. If it's a software problem, writing a solution and putting it out there is the best way to get started. And secondly, there would be open source software that you like, that you use, and that you always wished that had that extra little thing, or there was a bug that annoyed you that you always wished was fixed at some point. So when you're able to relate to something existing closely like that, that is when you're able to contribute. Quick example, let's say we're using Firefox, and Firefox is available in a lot of local languages, and you really wish that it was available in your language. It could be a project that you could just take up. There's no coding involved there. Let's say it's just the creation of a language pack, but it's still something. But you see what I mean, right? You have to be able to
Yeah.
relate
Yeah.
to a project to improve it, or you have to find a problem that annoys you and solve it, and that becomes the project. So this is the ideal first principles way to get started. But if you go out there looking for projects to contribute to, that's 99.99% you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
Uh, Sir, now that you've been in the industry for quite some time, could you tell us where technology or software in general is heading for the next 5 to 10 years, as to what avenues should students be looking at studying right now?
I mean, honestly, I don't really have that sort of foresight
Mhm.
and pace at which technology changes and
Yes.
and what these AI breakthroughs have brought about. It's very difficult to predict. However, one thing is certain: quality engineering skills, the ability to create and distribute quality software to solve problems, that isn't going away anytime soon. A good engineer, a skilled engineer might use a generative AI system, whatever, to help
Yes.
them build better software.
Yes.
So you have to look at it that way. I think I only have a common sense perspective here. The need for quality software that solves problems isn't going away anytime soon. It will still require highly skilled engineers who use all these cutting edge tools that are available out there to create
Mm.
high quality software. So what you should focus on is becoming a better engineer by the day, building and breaking things.
Yes. Sir, so latching on to that, let's say you're a student in college right now, what are some key skills or checklists that one must keep in mind or to become industry ready as such? Are there any things like that students can work on themselves that you can tell them?
I think resisting FOMO is absolutely an important skill. It's in the day of tech coaching on YouTube and social media. It's very easy to get swayed. Somebody says, learn this framework, job guaranteed. Learn this other
Mhm.
thing. This other thing is the future tomorrow. But no, that's not really how it works. The fundamental skills of being able to
Mhm.
understand technology, software, stuff underneath it, how software and humans interact, those first principle skills are absolutely necessary. So I can't suggest that anyone pick anything specific and learn. They should learn whatever interests them. It could be building web apps, it could be in anything, but they should build skills in depth there. Be a generalist, but also try to build depth where you have focus. I know this is very vague general advice,
Mhm.
but what I'm saying is, again, tinker hands on, build
Mhm.
useful things, build useful utilities, build useful software that you can give out and others use rather than follow random trends. And what you build this in, be it Python, PHP, whatever, Go, it doesn't matter, but key is building software that others find useful. That's a great barometer. And that immediately, the moment you build a little project that others start
Mhm.
using, you're already in the 1% of engineers.
Mhm. Yes. So, you've told that history helps people make better software. Could you maybe shed some light on the comment?
I think so. Learning history helps people make better decisions in life in general,
Mhm.
and software is a subset of that. To be very specific, so I like reading history. I read
Mhm.
all kinds of random history. There's no particular pattern, but the more I read history, the more I realize that very little changes over a period of time. All the woes, all the angst that we have today, lots of personal angst. People had those exact same feelings and angst and problems in their lives 5,000 years ago also. So once you realize, that gives you a certain perspective of how humans think, perceive, and act over
Mhm.
many millennia.
Mhm.
And when you design software for humans, you're really trying to build an interface with the human psyche, human psychology. When somebody comes and looks at a user interface you built, they should be delighted. They should not be annoyed. It should
Mhm.
convey what it has to convey to them clearly. It should align with some of their expectations. So it really understanding that bridge, that layer between the machine and the human is essential. So I've found that reading a lot of history, understanding, getting a better grasp of the human condition and the human perspective allows you to take trade offs in your work, whatever it may be, especially in technology. There's a lot of, when you're in an industry, for instance, with a lot of competition, venture capital funding, advertising, all kinds of stuff, right? People are competing with each other. there's always that FOMO. Oh, your competition just added ABCD bells and whistles. Why can't you? To be able to say that those ABCD things are just bells and whistles and they don't really provide value over a long period of time to the end user, you need to have that conviction. So you need to understand a bit of history also. And understanding software and computing history in general is also very helpful. There's a lot of things today that are packaged as cutting edge existed 20, 30 years ago, and they've made a comeback. So if you understand that history, it gives you it gives you a critical perspective to weed out what is right and wrong and make better trade-offs. So both angles, general human history and software history.
Right. Sir, and now let's say we have clubs or teams in general. How does one cultivate a culture or an environment that encourages innovation and, being spirited and working together and, yeah, working towards a goal? How does one create such kind of culture?
I think it's not really possible for a large number of people to be equally spirited, to be equally committed, to be equally creative. That's not possible. But how it typically works is that a small group of people who are spirited, who start they start doing something, they start building something, and a community forms around that. So if you'd like to build a community around you where people are equally spirited, people are tinkerers, people are being creative, you should lead by example. So it's not really about calling people in a room and teaching them the spirit. You can't teach people spirit. You can't even imbibe spirit. Some people have it by default. In some people, when they see or hear something, it sparks. And that seeing and hearing, leading by example, is the best thing to do. If you're talking about technology, open source software, tinkering, then the central point of your whole thesis should be that you should be building stuff and getting others to collaborate on that. And then culture emanates from that.
Right. All right, sir. Sir, and you have led teams for quite some time now. What are some leadership skills or qualities one can learn from your experience or can look out for when leading a team in general?
I mean, I've never held a corporate job. I've never worked in corporate environments in that sense. So
Mhm.
I but what I can say,
Lead by
reflecting on
example.
built, yeah, Zerodha over the last decade and what I've seen around us in the industry, I think there's no secret sauce. If you want to build a good team, and you have to make sure that people who are a part of the team generally happy. Nobody will ever be super happy or super content, but
Mhm.
majority of the people should be happy majority of the time.
Okay.
So how do you do that? I mean, decent relationships, basic human decency, courtesy. It's that. It's just that. If you, what is a team ultimately, right? It's a group of people who have to work together,
Yes.
and they don't all have to love each other, but they should like each other just enough to be able to work with each other. So
Mm.
you assemble a group of people who adhere to some of these basic principles, that they'll treat everyone around them decently, and of
Mm.
course people who have the skills. In a tech team you need skills also, and then it should just work. There are no set principles per se, and you always set expectations clearly. We always set expectations clearly for people in our teams. Promising
Mm.
people that they can get to ABCD in 2 years, that we're going to conquer the world. I don't know. I
Mm.
mean, I don't know if that works, because
Mm.
you hype up people and you are unable to deliver. People are
Mm.
going to be disappointed. People will
Mm.
feel that they were lied to. So
Mm.
just common sense stuff. Hang out, work well,
Okay.
stick to a decent, be disciplined enough. That's about it. Just human decency in general.
Sir, you said that you think around and, do some hobby projects. Could you highlight on probably some hobby projects that you are using now and like, have been that you found online they have created in quite some time?
Uh, an issue I have is that I have too many projects, and I can never find enough time to work on all the projects that I have and I like. But so I was telling you about that Docker incident from the last weekend.
Yes. Yes.
That was, yeah. So I was rebuilding this dictionary I'd built.
Mhm.
I made this open source, open data dictionary called Olam in 2010. It's an English Malayalam dictionary.
Oh,
It's the
okay. Okay.
largest Malayalam dictionary available out there, all open data.
Mm.
and open source. So, and it's used by, I think, 2.5 million Malayalam speakers every month.
Oh.
And it has been running continuously on a $5 DigitalOcean instance, by the way, for the last 13 years. So I think that's still one of my favorite projects. A lot of people find it extremely useful in their daily lives, and that gives you being able to build technology that people from a wide spectrum, wide strata of society find useful equally. Now that is extremely satisfying. So last week I was working on that, full upgrade. So I wanted to upgrade this, and I have this fascination with dictionary. So I think 3 years ago, I built this project called DictPress, which makes it easy for anyone to publish and host a dictionary. It's like WordPress. With WordPress, you publish a blog, magazine, website, etc. With DictPress, you publish dictionaries for any language. So I built out that tool to enable more dictionaries like Olam, and there are more dictionaries now coming up. 3 years ago, we launched Alar. That's a Kannada dictionary. Again, open data, written by V. Krishna. So that's available online. I think now it has close to 2 lakh users every month. There's a new dictionary that is coming up, all 4 South Indian languages. So these dictionary projects are always ongoing. I always find time to work on them. Another big project that I've been working on for the last 5 years, quite actively, is ListMonk.
Yes, everyone knows this.
Yeah, so it's a newsletter and mailing list manager. I think around 2018-19, I was super pissed off that we were unable to find a nice newsletter system that worked for us to use at Zerodha. And one day I got really pissed off and I decided to just start building like a simple mailing list manager, and it evolved into ListMonk. So I think most open source projects out there in the world start off like that. You have this problem, it annoys you, you decide to, get your feet wet and you get started and it becomes a thing. So I think ListMonk is quite popular now and I continue to work on it actively.
Yeah, so back when I met you initially in the FOSS event as well, when I asked you about how you were able to run Zerodha with such a small team, you said it was all about putting systems and processes in place. Could you just highlight on that?
So it's not, it's easier said than done. And you can't build an organization, a young organization, and have systems and processes in place on day one. But the goal is to eventually get to a place where you have the right kind of modular systems, the right kind of business processes, etc., which is well understood, that are simple to execute, all working in cohesion. But it takes a long time. So to build Zerodha to the scale it is today, it has taken us more than a decade. So we have to really look at the entire history of how it has come up very slowly, from scratch, from first principles. And then when you build something slowly, when you have the conviction and the ability to, let's say, resist FOMO and do engineering the right way, build a business the right way, set the right processes, treat customers the right way, then all of this adds up and you build it slowly, modularly, piece by piece, and then you get lucky and it becomes big. But you can't do this overnight. It can't be done on day one. And if you are in a rush to build something big in 12 months or 24 months or 3 years or whatever, then it's very difficult to do this. So we've had the luxury of time and a lot of luck.
Yeah. Sir, so what do you find the most fulfilling about your role? What inspires you and keeps you motivated to continue working, although you had pitfalls or struggles or immensely stressful situations while building tech for all these years?
It's multiple factors. Personally, I'm not a finance person. Finance is not something I enjoy either. But I like engineering. I like technology. I like it. I think I like it unconditionally. Tinkering, building, R&D. So that keeps me going. Every day we're working on new problems. We're writing new software. We are fixing old software. So there's the aspect of engineering. And then there's the group of people that I've hung out with for over the last decade. If you're not in an environment where you have the right kind of people, right kind of culture, it's impossible to survive. So we've thankfully managed to create an environment and culture and have a group of people where people work well with each other. So that is motivation. And then now that Zerodha is successful, we found immense success over the last few years. We've decided to use this success to do good out there. That's why we've set up, let's say, the Ring Matter Foundation that focuses on climate change and environment. And we made big commitments, financial commitments to the
Yes.
foundation from zero. So at the end of the day, the work is something that you like, let's say tinkering, engineering, building. You're able to hang out with people who are doing it with you for a very long time. And then all this work is successful, is generating material and financial success, which goes back to the society to and works, plays a part in societal development, social development around you. It backs the causes that you're passionate about. All of
Yes.
these factors together give you enough motivation to keep on doing what you're doing.
Okay. Sir, now that we're towards the end of the podcast, for all the listeners and students who are stuck till now, any last piece of advice you have for them for taking on this fast changing dynamic field of tech, or in general as such for someone who's at their college listening to this?
Just the same advice that I think I always give. If you like technology, if you like software, you have to tinker, you have to build stuff with your own hands. So look for problems around you, build solutions, put it out there, give it out there. That's how you learn. That's how you help others also in the process. And that might just set you on a career path that you desire. So that's all I have to say.